Welcome to the EG Media channel. In today's video, we're going to be following up with another Star Wars video. Last week, I talked about the successes of the Maul television show. Today, we're going to be talking about the next Star Wars project to come out, the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. Now, this one, I didn't really know what was the general consensus. What were people feeling about going into this movie? And so, researching this video was very fun for me, just to kind of figure out what is likely going to happen with this movie and its release. So the Mandalorian movie is slated to come out May 22nd. That'll probably be a week from now when I want to post this. I'll also be doing a review of the movie, hopefully either the day after its release or at least that weekend for you guys, with the general premise of it following up season 3 and also Din working with the New Republic. And there's been a lot of speculation of what the plot's going to be. Is it going to be, Din and Grogu trying to get this Rata the Hutt, or maybe trying to prevent the Empire's influence over the Hutts? There's been a lot of speculation just based on the trailer. We don't really have a great picture of what the story is going to be. And so I do think that's one weakness of the trailers thus far, is that we don't really have a great idea outside of just Din and Grogu are going to go on an adventure and it's going to be having to deal with the New Republic, the remnants of the old Empire. And to me, that's fine. Let's see where that idea goes. Can they execute it well? But that, to me, is not the relevant point of this discussion. The relevant point is the news that have been coming out surrounding the movie. So, firstly, the movie is set to make around $80 million during the Memorial Day weekend release. This would actually be a franchise low. And you might be thinking, $80 million, that sounds pretty good for a weekend. For Star Wars, that's not so good. Star Wars at least used to be a franchise that when it put something out, you were going to go and see it. When you look at like The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, those movies broke records in terms of money. Now, say what you want about their quality, overall, they performed very well in the box office, just raking in the money. And with this movie, this would be a franchise low by a substantial amount if the predictions are correct. It would be $20 million lower than the Solo movie. And for you guys that were in the Star Wars community back then, regardless of what you think of the Han Solo movie, it bombed at the box office. It did not nearly get the money that Disney was hoping it was going to make. And it also started the trend of Star Wars beginning to not have movies being released. A lot of Star Wars has been focused on these television shows, whether that be The Book of Boba Fett, The Mandalorian, Andor, whatever. A lot of Star Wars has now taken on becoming Disney Plus shows. So this is kind of our return to the cinema for Star Wars. And I think it's a very important moment. If this movie is to bomb like it is predicted, Disney might get a little scared and say, okay, let's continue doing these Disney Plus shows to try and hopefully bring people in to subscribe to our platform. And I think that's really important. So let's go through then, what is the circumstances for this Mandalorian movie? Does it have a chance? Are the predictions probably accurate, or maybe not so much? So the first thing I want to look at is when we look at the trailers. One thing I just wanted to take a quick peruse on, because it's usually a decent way of figuring out what people think about a movie or a television show to come out, is to just peruse the comments for a little while. Because that can usually tell if people are really hyped for the movie or if people are really down on the movie. And I do think with the trailer for this movie, it wasn't that positive. I think the last trailer where they had a bit more action in it was a little bit more positively received. I know some of the teasers they've put out, I know some of the other trailers have not done well at all. And so I really do think that it kind of reflects where we are right now with the Star Wars community, that I'm not sure who wants this movie. In terms of everything you could do Star Wars wise to return to cinema, why was it The Mandalorian and Grogu? They really peaked, I would say, back in season 2 in terms of popularity. And I think if you think about it and you go back and you go, okay, well, when they were thinking about should this be a movie, they probably would have been thinking about that after season 2, the height of the popularity of the show. But then season 3 came out. And now we've kind of gone off the rails. This show is no longer a slam dunk. And really, you have a tough situation where you're supposed to be, you would hope, with the television shows, just climbing up and up and up in your popularity. Kind of similar to Andor. Like Andor, to me, is the perfect example of when you would want to do a movie, where you have a show that the first season, maybe not a whole lot of people watched, but it was critically acclaimed. And then the second season came in, and it did really well. People were watching, it was critically acclaimed. It did really well. The Mandalorian's the opposite. If you're someone like me, I actually think the show has declined every single season. I really liked season 1, season 2 started to lose my interest, and then season 3 I basically just didn't care about by the time I finished it. So let's go through a lot of the statistics and just talk about overall how the Mandalorian series has done leading into the movie. So the first season of The Mandalorian was a very important moment for Star Wars because there was not a lot of good products coming out, especially in live action. Yes, there were things like the last season of Clone Wars, there was the Tales of the Jedi, but overall, the sequel trilogy, regardless of what you think about it, had overall failed by the time Rise of Skywalker released. The Han Solo movie hadn't done well. You had other live action shows that were either coming out or in production that did not do well, like the Kenobi show, and also the Book of Boba Fett. So The Mandalorian was really important here. But Mandalorian Season 1 was different. People tuned in, and it was a big hit for Disney. The first season had a Rotten Tomatoes score of 93%. This was equal for both the critics and anyone that just wanted to make a review on Rotten Tomatoes. The IMDb score was an 8.5 out of 10, and for some reason, tracking the stats across the major 3 critic sites, Metacritic was always lower on the show than IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, so I'm not sure why that is. I don't know if they're just a bit more critical of the show or what, but overall, Metacritic, the critics gave it a 70 score, and the audience gave it a 7.7 out of 10. Either way, a pretty strong first season, especially for a Star Wars franchise that had been struggling. And for me, I think this is my favorite season of the television show because it felt more like a smaller scale story between Din and Grogu and their adventures. It just felt like a nice watch. It didn't need to be involved with all these overwhelming plot lines that people had their opinions on because you're in that weird era between the Empire and the originals and the sequels. It was almost like its own standalone project. And after season 1, that really stopped being a thing. Once this show started getting really popular, we started to see it be more of a tie-in to other storylines that were in Star Wars, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely shifts the tone and vibe from the first season to season 2 and season 3. So that'll move us to Mandalorian season 2. Now, Mandalorian Season 2 is a bit weird, because in terms of Rotten Tomatoes, it had the exact same critic score at 93%, but for the public, it actually went down 2%, so I think that's a little interesting given the fact that on the other sites, and basically every other statistic, everyone else was more positive on it, so I don't know if this is just people went back and now don't view Season 2 as highly, and so maybe that's why it's a little lower now, but overall, 91% is still a very strong season of television. IMDb gave it an 8.7 out of 10, so improved from an 8.5 to an 8.7. And then Metacritic also went up on it, with the critics having a 76 out of 100, and then a 7.9 out of 10 rating from just anyone that could leave a review on Metacritic. So definitely an improvement overall from, I would say, the general audience. Critics, they liked Season 2 more than Season 1. So this, to me, is where there likely would have been the planning phase of, let's make this Mandalorian movie. The show is at the height of its popularity. Critics were loving it. The public was still loving it. Let's start making a movie. And I think this is where things started to get out of control, because as many of you know, the Book of Boba Fett came between Season 2 and Season 3, and basically the start of Season 3 of Mandalorian came in the Book of Boba Fett, which is one of the worst shows on Disney Plus in the Star Wars universe. So already off to a very weird start. And like I said, the Mandalorian show seemed to me, as it grew in popularity, it started to become more of a, okay, let's have Mandalorian collab with all these different plot lines, whether they be from the Clone Wars or the Rebels or something else. And I think it started to lose its identity of what it was, especially in the first season and partly in the second season as well. And if you've watched The Mandalorian Season 2, I won't really spoil it, but the vibe you kind of get is some of the storylines feel like they are now closed, and now we're moving into a new section of the Mandalorian story. But when you get Book of Boba Fett and then into Mandalorian Season 3, we kind of just revert that. And it very much shows in the way that critics and casual audiences looked at it. Now, one thing I noticed is that the casual audience was much more critical of Season 3 than critics were. Critics were, yes, down on it, but they were not nearly as down on it as the average person. So let's just go through some of the statistics for Mandalorian Season 3. Rotten Tomatoes had the season at an 84%, again, dropped around 10%. The public had it at a 51%, which is extremely low. On IMDb, it dropped a whole point from the first season. If you're looking at it from the second season, it dropped from 8.7 to 7.5. And then on Metacritic, it went all the way back down to a 70 critic rating, which is surprising because it's still the same critic rating as season 1. And then also dropped down to a 4.9 out of 10 on the Metacritic, like just casual audience. Anybody can give their review. So overall, the show fell off of a cliff for most people. Season 3 was not enjoyable. For it to have this low of a rating is very telling to me. And so when you're following up season 3 with now a movie, you have a show that had a steep decline. Who is now going to go to the cinema and watch that movie? And I think that's the problem you have, is that getting someone to watch your show at home and on a streaming service is a lot easier, I think, of a sell than saying, okay, let's go out to the movie theater, let's pay money to watch this show. Likely you're going to have to get popcorn, a soda, whatever. It's a lot harder of a sell. And so I think that is the problem right there, and why I think it's being projected that this movie is not going to do well, because it's a declining series overall in terms of season 2 to season 3. And you're asking people to go back to the theaters when Star Wars hasn't been to the theaters in a while now at this point. And the last time it didn't do that well. So we'll see how that shapes out. Myself, I will be going to see it more because I'm just curious of what they do. And I also want to do a little bit of a review on it for you guys. So I will go see it. I don't have, very high hopes given what I've seen from it so far. But I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts are. Are you going to go see the movie? Do you have high hopes for it? Are you not very high on it? Let me know all of your maybe concerns or worries, but then also what maybe you're looking forward to from this movie. And I'll see you guys all in the next one. Again, I will have a review up for this next week, so stay tuned for that and subscribe for more. Bye, guys.